Greetings gamers and welcome to another episode of Retro Raider. My name is Johnny Retro and here we are back again guys for another very special episode. That is right, today we are celebrating, I really can't believe that I'm saying this, but the 25th anniversary of the iconic Final Fantasy VII. 25 years ago, and of course that I'm talking about the Japanese release of Final Fantasy VII, which I proudly have right here, the original Final Fantasy VII released on Japan. This was actually given to me by a very dear friend and huge supporter of the Retro Raider show. Brun, my friend, thank you so much. And let me just cut right into the chase, guys. This video is not going to be, my memories or my stories with Final Fantasy VII, because I already made a lot of content regarding that. I'm just going to ramble a little bit, just talking about this beautiful game and really just celebrating Final Fantasy VII. I will dare to say that this is not only one of the most important JRPGs of all time, but I will also dare to say that it is without question one of the most important video games on the video game industry. And I'm going to start right with that, Japanese role-playing games. Now, role-playing games in Japan have always been a thing. Especially during, the second half of the 80s and going on until now. There's a lot of exclusive stuff that never was released outside of Japan, and even the stuff that was released here in the West, during the 8-bit and 16-bit era. Some things were not released, for example, here on the PAL region like they were on the North America. And the thing is, role-playing games were kind of a niche. It is not like today where, major AAA franchises, franchises that didn't start as role-playing games. Even though they're not true RPGs these days, they tend to have role-playing elements on it. Me, if you guys follow my channel, you know that I'm a huge fan of RPGs, but my RPG journey didn't start with video games. It actually started on books, not Dungeons and Dragons, because when I started gaming, Dungeons and Dragons was not that popular here in Portugal. My adventures with role-playing games actually started with Fighting Fantasy. They were translated here in Portugal as Aventuras Fantásticas. But with video games, of course, that we had RPGs here, both on the NES, Super Nintendo, and Mega Drive. Now, speaking about the Mega Drive, because this is important for the whole context of this, Portugal was kind of a case study during the 16-bit era because, Mega Drive was king here. It just ruled. I remember that, back in the day, and this is not something that I lived, at its fullest because I only started gaming in 93. I had my first content in 95, so I didn't experience that much of the early 90s stuff, and of course not the 80s because I was born in 88. But I will dare to say that 1 to 10 kids here in Portugal during the first half of the 90s, 1 kid had the Super Nintendo when 10 kids had, or 9 kids had the Mega Drive. And the Mega Drive did receive some decent role-playing games, but nothing like, the ones that we had on the Super Nintendo, by Squaresoft and Enix. And again, even for the people that played role-playing games, it was not like it is today. This was kind of a niche thing. Until, and this is why the rambling, Final Fantasy VII came out, because this was really a turning point. Not just a turning point on a new era of gaming, a new generation, the 32-bit, not only just a turning point for Squaresoft, because, Squaresoft, the old Squaresoft, now Square Enix, had, a major partnership with Nintendo. Until then, of course, the PS1 came out. And the reason why this game is so important, it was that it was really the first Japanese role-playing game that had, massive worldwide success. At least for me, it was very different from everything that I played before, even within the role-playing genre. Because for me, I used to play, some dungeon crawlers like Diablo, for example, which came out actually at the same time or less as Final Fantasy VII. But yeah, Western RPGs were way different. Of course, that the aesthetics. I would say that Western RPGs have always been more, like medieval, fantasy focused, like Skyrim, for example. But a take on the genre as Final Fantasy VII, I think that it was a brand new concept for a lot of people. what did I had that I could relate with Final Fantasy VII? First of all, anime, which, again, we're talking about 97, 98 for me. Anime was not huge still here in Portugal. We had, of course, stuff like Dragon Ball, which, I mean, it was major everywhere, but even that, even anime was kind of a niche, except with certain things, again, like Dragon Ball or Sailor Moon, later on, Pokemon and Digimon or Yu-Gi-Oh! So the aesthetics of the game, the graphics also, of course, was really, really what caught my attention. And I would say the characters, for sure. And I still think that to this day, Final Fantasy VII has some of the best written characters on an RPG. Turn-based. Let's talk about turn-based. This is how I was introduced to turn-based. I really, really enjoyed it. It was something that was difficult for me to understand first, but I started to really, really enjoy it. And I miss that. I really miss turn-based in modern games. We don't have those as much, even within the RPG genre. The world of Final Fantasy VII, the setting, I mean, this was really an open world experience, like we never had it before on a video game. And it's a massive game. This is my original copy from back in the day. I mean, 3 discs on a game. This was really, really something else. I think that I've mentioned this before. When I first got Final Fantasy VII, I think that I only beaten the game when Final Fantasy VIII was already out. Because it took me a long time. It took me a hell out of a long time to beat this game. Back in the day, no YouTube, nothing like that. It was just me, a couple of friends that really, really enjoyed this game. And we kind of helped each other. The soundtrack. And as a musician, as somebody who really, really appreciates video game music, the soundtrack of Final Fantasy VII, I would dare to say that it is one of the best ever made. And I will also say that it is the most beautiful crafted work by Nobuo Uematsu, the songwriter or the composer. One Winged Angel, the theme of Sephiroth. I saw an interview of Nobuo Uematsu where this is really, really fascinating. He wrote that music like if it was like a puzzle, because he had the different parts, and then he just combined everything together, and it came out the One Winged Angel theme. That song, it really made an impact on me. And Sephiroth, I mean, what a character. For me, one of the best villains in any video game. As a kid, I used to be such a fanboy of Sephiroth. Still to this day, I love this character so very much. The battle theme also, which, funny enough, it is my cell phone ringtone, and I'm not kidding. The protagonist, Cloud. What can I say about Cloud? In some ways, in retrospective, he's kind of the, role-playing cliche of a protagonist. But I think that, we all love Cloud. Cloud is awesome. Tifa, Barret, Aerith. And again, spoiler alert, but I mean, if you never played Final Fantasy VII, guys, it is what it is. The Aerith's death. One of the most shocking deaths in video game history ever. Another very strong moment that made an impact of me back in the day. And it kind of sucked because I really, really enjoyed Aerith. Not only as a character, the story, the story arc of the character, but as a playable character, because she's a badass healer, and I always enjoy having Aerith on my party. So what do I think that Final Fantasy VII represents? Is it the best JRPG ever? Is it the best video game ever made? Like a lot of people say, no, of course not. I mean, that doesn't exist. The best video game ever, that doesn't exist. However, is it the most important one in the franchise, in the whole Final Fantasy franchise? I would say so. Just because, again, it was the first 3D Final Fantasy game. It was really the first well-crafted 3D JRPG. It was a revolutionary, once again, a revolutionary game that introduced the genre to the Western gamers. And I mean, the legacy that we have with Final Fantasy VII, I mean, the movie Advent Children, we have a one-episode anime, we have, and I'm going to jump right into this one, the remake, the so long remake of Final Fantasy VII. And let me just take this one really quick out of the way. I enjoyed the remake. I'm really, really enjoying it. I wish that we had the full thing, not just, through episodes. However, do I prefer the remake or the original one? I prefer the original one, not only just because of nostalgia, because I grew up with this game, but it's a different game. It's the same story told in a different way. That's the only reason why I prefer the original. But I mean, if you never played Final Fantasy VII, go for it. Go with the remake. I don't think that you can go wrong with this one. This is a phenomenal game. I also want to point out this version on the Switch combined with Final Fantasy VIII. This twin pack is really interesting. I would say that it is a really fun way to experience the original Final Fantasy VII and also Final Fantasy VIII. So if you never played the original and you want to try it, I would totally recommend this one. Just out of curiosity for you guys that don't know, I pulled this out from my collection. That is right, this is Final Fantasy VII on the NES. This is actually a demake, not a remake like this one. This is a demake. I have a full video on this game that I did a couple of years ago. I will leave the link down below for you guys to check it out. And yeah, this is a ROM hack, it is true, made by the hacker Lugia 2009. And what this is pretty much was that, he grabbed the concept from a game, another hack that was released in Taiwan, never translated, very buggy, a very poor demake of Final Fantasy VII, but he grabbed that concept, he gathered a team, and with skins and sprites from other Final Fantasy games, like the Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3. He arranged the soundtrack to match the original one, and he made this. He made this, and it's available on a cart. It truly is Final Fantasy VII on 8-bit for the NES. It is just a curiosity, but if you like retro gaming, if you like pixel art games, if you like the NES, give this one a go. So how can I recap this video? How can I end this video? Final Fantasy VII for me, without question, it is a game that really changed my life, as a fan of the genre, as a fan of Japanese role-playing games, as a fan of Squaresoft, of the franchise, of the Final Fantasy franchise. It's so nostalgic for me, and I'm really starting to feel, the gray hairs coming out, because 25 years. Final Fantasy VII is turning 25 years. It is what it is, and I think that the legacy and the outcome, we can still see it on modern days. A lot of kids, and I'm not just about the remake, but I see a lot of kids that are starting to get into retro gaming, exploring the stuff from the past, that are really jumping into Final Fantasy VII. It is truly one of those games where you have to play it at least once. You have to experience this at least one time. Just experience the whole thing. Again, you can't go wrong with Final Fantasy VII, but if I may suggest, play the original. Play the original game. Play it on the Nintendo Switch. Play it on, the PS4. Play it on PC. But again, if you like role-playing games, if you like Japanese role-playing games, if you like turn-based, please give Final Fantasy VII a go if you still haven't played it yet. So yeah, I'm going to stop the video right here, guys. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Final Fantasy VII. I really can't wait for the future of this franchise, and I can't wait for the future of Final Fantasy VII, because we need more. We need more. We can't get enough of Final Fantasy VII, guys. And please let me know about you. Let me know down below a happy memory, a story that you have with Final Fantasy VII. When did you first play the game? Did you play the original back in the day? Do you prefer the remake? Have you played the demake on the NES? But please share what Final Fantasy VII means to you, because if you're like me, if you played it back in the day and if you enjoy it, it is without question a very special game for you, like it is for me and like it is for millions of Final Fantasy fans. But just share what do you think when you think about this game, because for me it really takes me to a very special and happy place of my life. So once again, guys, feel free to share your thoughts down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have the extra time and patience, feel free to follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, all of the links down below. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of the gaming community, and game a lot.